Forward to the cloud. All right, you might have to all click that. That's okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk today about negotiating the deal. That's the primary topic, and then we're going to finish it up by combining in contract to close. There's really not a lot to add into it, so it made sense for us to try to combine the two classes together. So as I mentioned before, feel free to interrupt me at any time. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them whenever you have the questions. Don't feel like you need to wait until I take a breath or or a sip of water. Just feel free to chime in whenever you have those questions. All right, you can all see the slide. Can you all see that okay? Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a little bit more interactive. I want to ask you guys this question. What things do you currently negotiate every day? Even if you've never done a transaction, what do you negotiate every single day? Any thoughts? Maybe you don't realize, but you are negotiating things each and every day. Some of us have boyfriends, girlfriends, husband, wives, kids, dogs, pets. You're always negotiating with your pet. Get off the couch, if you think about it, we're actually negotiating all things that we do on a regular basis. I'm married 25 years now, actually. Yeah, this is our 25th year anniversary. And I always laugh because my wife and I, we have a great communication, and that's probably what's kept us, aside from, of course, we love each other very deeply, of course. But my point though is that, they say everything's work, relationships, marriages, your job, everything is work, whether you think about it or not. And you have oftentimes choices or, conversations, and you don't realize that you're actually negotiating in some of those things. What TV show do you want to watch tonight? Oh, I don't want to watch that. I'd rather watch this. Or what movie do you want to go to? Oh, that's scary. I don't want to go to that one. What restaurant? My wife and I we go out to eat a lot. And it's hard for us to find new restaurants because you get used to being treated well in the restaurants that you frequent. So it is partially a negotiation when you think about it. I'm trying to make her happy. She's trying to make me happy. But on the same token, you both, I'm not in the mood for Chinese tonight. How about this? Well, those are negotiations, or I just recently bought a motorcycle. Trust me, that was a negotiation. There's a lot of, potential hazards with owning a motorcycle. And so that was a discussion and somewhat of a, negotiation of, between husband and wife. And so all these little things that you don't think about are all some form of negotiation. Your kids, I want you to get your chores done. Well, can I do it tomorrow? That's a negotiation. No, I want it done today. Or you have until the end of the week to get these chores done. If you got younger kids, you might be negotiating what time they're going to go to bed. Or your 19 and 21-year-olds, my kids think nothing about staying out till 3 a.m. Well, that's great, but mom and dad can't sleep until we know you're home safe. So we try to negotiate with them, in some cases. Can you at least call me, let me know where you are? Can you be home at a reasonable hour so I can get some sleep? What do you want for dinner? Oh, I don't want to cook that. I'll cook this. It's all a negotiation when you think about it. Your employer, how many hours you're going to work this week? Can I work remote or do I have to come to the office? What are your tasks? When are they due? Geez, we don't have enough time to get this task done at this time. So how about we do it for Monday? Or maybe you've got current clients that you're negotiating your schedule, how, they want to see a property when you've got dinner plans, or maybe your kids' soccer game. So you try to work out a different appointment. That's a negotiation, so we don't understand or think that we're negotiating, but we are. Same thing if you have services for your home. Maybe you you need some landscape, and you get a couple of quotes from individuals, and you might negotiate your quote. Well, geez, this company can do it for this price. Can you match it? Okay. Or maybe you have online purchases, eBay, Facebook. People buy stuff all the time, and you negotiate these items. So you don't realize it, but negotiation is part of your life. Whether you know it or not, you got to figure out, how do I use the skills I already have? And each one of you already have those skills. But when it applies to real estate, you have to think, okay, well, not everybody is the same. Some people take words differently. Some people are more emotional. Some people hate to negotiate. Any of you bought a car recently? People hate going and buying cars because trying to negotiate a deal with a car dealership is tough, and you don't often get where you want to get because they play games behind the scenes. Not that they all do that, but that's a normal thing that we see in car sales. So how do we translate all of this negotiation that we do on a daily basis into what you're hopefully going to be doing regularly, which is selling real estate? Well, so we have some tips for you when you're negotiating. Always be professional. You want to make sure that the other side of the table feels that you're trying to be fair. Because if it's a one-way negotiation and you're always, no, it's my way or the highway, well, that's not really a negotiation. So that's going to make people on the other side feel like, geez, I don't know if I want to do business with this person because he doesn't seem to have any flexibility, or it's all his way or the highway. The old term has to be a win-win makes sense. Like when you think of, any good negotiation, if both people feel like they got a fair deal, then it's going to be perceived as a good transaction in essence. But when somebody feels like, nobody gave in at all, it was all me, they didn't put anything into the relationship, they didn't put anything into the transaction, that's where you have bumpy roads or bumpy rides. Okay. Remember your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal is to put the deal together for your client so you can make some money, and so you can build your business, you can build your referrals, but you also got to fight for your client, right? So you don't want to lay down, you don't want to not throw punches, you've got to strike when it makes sense. My wife uses a term, she says, pick your battles. I like that. I like that term. It makes a lot of sense. Do you want to die on the hill, or is this a fight not even worth having? So you got to kind of figure out, give a little, take a little. If you're always the one giving, it's not going to probably be a good relationship. And this is something you could look at, not just if you're negotiating a deal, but your relationship with your client. If you think about it, right? If you're always the one that's giving and they're never giving anything, they're never bending, they're always like, hey, you got to show me property when I want to see it. I don't care what your life plans are. I don't care what you got going on. Either you see it when I want to do it, or I'll go somewhere else. Well, that's not going to be a healthy relationship if there's no give and take there. So just some things to kind of think about. Stay relaxed and calm. I know I said this yesterday. This is really important. You know, some people get frustrated very easily. Um, I remember talking with an agent where I presented an offer, and she's like, "This is ridiculous. Your price is way off." And I forget her name, but let's call her Susie for the purpose of this conversation. I said, "Susie, I'm not trying to upset you. You know, I'm simply letting you know that my client feels this is the value. You know, you don't have to agree with us, but I mean, this is what we feel the value is. And that's based on these comps. You know, I didn't see any comps that supported your value, but maybe I missed something, you know. And I think I suggested this the other day. I said, can you send me your comps so I can look them over? Because clearly I missed something. Oh, you know, that's not necessary. You should be able to do your own homework. Well, she didn't send me her comps because she didn't have any comps, but she was just digging her feet in and trying to fight for her client, which is great, but she had no basis. You know, she had nothing to support her value. So I remained relaxed and I had just said to her, you know, this, I'm not trying to make this confrontational or adversarial. We're just offering what we think is a fair value based on the supporting comparables. And wouldn't you know, she, you know, gave some thought to that and we ended up making the deal work. But it almost took time for me to consult with the agent to kind of calm her down. Even though I was perfectly calm, she wasn't. You know, she was far from it. So you have to kind of keep those things in mind. Um, don't be that adversarial person. Don't be looking to say, I got the best deal for my client. You know, I was talking with an agent last night who was advising her client to walk away from a transaction. She was saying, you know, the seller's being unreasonable. They don't want to fix the mold problems. They don't want to give us a concession for all the repairs. And the agent wanted to go to fight, to, you know, put up her hands and duke it out with the other agent. If not in a battle, certainly wanted to call their bluff and wanted to say, well, look, if you can't bend at all, we're going to walk. And the buyer's like, no, I don't want you to do that. I want the house. Well, I'm not trying to lose the house for you, but we got to fight back a little. You can't just keep taking, you know, a slap here and a slap there. You do have to show that you know, you have a backbone, and that, hey, we're just trying to, you know, to have this be a fair negotiation and not be taken advantage of. So in her situation, she's got her hands tied because she wants to go back and kind of call their bluff, and he doesn't want her to because he's afraid of loss. You know, so she has to listen to what her client's telling her to do. You know, but that's part of the game. You know, sometimes we want to fight and they don't, so we have to kind of keep all that in stride. Jot down your points and your ideas that you want to communicate before you make that phone call. This is really important because you're going to forget stuff. You know, you might bring something up, or the agent might interrupt you and make a statement, and that just throws you all off. And now you forget what your key points were, or you forget what it was that you called them to actually negotiate or worked out for your client. Another piece of advice I would give you too is, you know, and I know everybody's a different age and we're all brought up in different generations. You want to pick up the phone more than anything, but you still need to document. You still need to have written backup so you can document things for your file. You know, you don't want to just be writing down so and so said yes to this. You do want to have some backup documentation. So what I recommend is make the phone call, work out whatever you need to work out, and then follow it up with an email. Just wanted to confirm based on our conversation, this is what the parties have agreed to. And then at least you have done both. The reason why I tell you this is an important tip is I've actually gone through some transactions where the other side would not answer the phone and they'd never email me back. They only would text. That's it. That's not a good way to conduct business. That's very difficult. You all know just as much as I have that text can be misunderstood. You know, when's the last time you read a text and thought someone was upset with you when they may not have been? Or maybe you thought they were joking and they weren't, or vice versa. So you can easily misunderstand or misinterpret a text because there's no person, you know, telling it to you. You don't understand the tone. So don't discount the value of making that phone call. Okay, I really think that's a big issue. The other thing is they always say, listen more than you talk, give more than you take. But that just makes sense. You can learn so much, and sometimes people will talk so much that they'll tell you more than they should have. You know, so that's my favorite is when you ask a simple question and they give you a 5-minute dissertation about, you know, whatever it is that we're talking about. So try to think of these things, okay? Remember that everything is negotiable. Every date on your contract is negotiable. Every term is negotiable. All right. Everything in a home is negotiable. Even if the seller says the chandelier in the dining room is excluded from the sale, okay, it's still negotiable. The buyer might love that chandelier. Doesn't mean the buyer isn't going to write it into their contract. Okay. Everything is negotiable. All right. Anybody have any questions about those things so far? All right. So what are some common points that you're going to negotiate? Your price. You're going to negotiate the terms of the offer. But mostly what you'll probably be negotiating is aspects of the deal, such as your inspection time frame. Oftentimes we try to make our inspections 10 days. And the agents on the other side are going to try to tighten up those time frames as much as possible. One, because they don't want to be off the market for 10 days if they could be off the market for 7 days, right? They're thinking that extra 3-day period, if the deal's going to fall apart, they don't want to lose that valuable time frame. So, you know, just keep that in mind that you could have a 10-day inspection in your contract, which is perfectly normal. There's nothing absurd about that at all, but they could be trying to get you down to 7 days or 5 days. 5 days is tough. You know, home inspectors are not as readily available for that type of time frame. So I really wouldn't agree to anything less than 7 days. And or, you know what, you might say, you know what, let's make a call to the home inspection company and see if we can schedule that right now so that we can make sure that we're going to fall within that time frame. Okay. If you agree to that and your client signs the offer, and let's say something happens and they can't do it within that time frame, well, you're going to have to file for an extension. You're going to have to ask for that extension. That's a negotiation. Hey, I know we agreed to this, but you know, the home inspector got sick and he hasn't been working for 2 days. So he's backed up and now he can't do it. So that's a negotiation. We've got to go back and try to figure out how we're going to get this worked out. Same thing with a closing date. A lot of times the seller wants to be out as soon as possible because they don't want to have to keep paying their mortgage. or maybe their life plans are such that they need to be in another location, by a certain date. Or maybe there's another property that they're closing on. So closing date is by far probably the most popular negotiation, if you will. It's good to be flexible. If your buyer can be flexible on the closing date, that usually gives them an upper hand. All right, not always, but sometimes you'll find that that is indeed the case. And this is why it's important. I think we spoke about this yesterday. It's important to call the agent and make them aware you're going to submit an offer, but then ask them, is there anything that's important to the seller? This is a great opportunity for them to tell you, yeah, they need a 60-day closing date, or they need a 90-day or a specific date. And what I would recommend, if they have those needs, then I'd recommend that your buyer clients try to accommodate, because it's going to give them the upper hand if they can. All right. Earnest money deposit. This is also another thing we see negotiated. The standard deposit amount's $500 to $1,000. Naturally, the buyer wants to put as little money up as possible because that money's always at risk. And the seller has the opposite interest. They want to see as much money as possible. If you're on the buyer side, you're trying to negotiate as little as possible. On the seller side, you're going to say, well, $500 deposit's really nothing. Can you make it $2,000 or $2,500? And it's a negotiation. You go back to your buyer and you ask them, are you okay with that? At the end of the day, I know Kathy mentioned this the other day, you can't just keep someone's deposit. There's a process that has to go through. Even if a buyer defaults on the contract, it's not an automatic, relinquishing of that money. There's a process, and if they don't come to a common meeting of minds, it's going to tie up the house. So buyers don't often lose their money. There usually is some sort of give and take in that. It's negotiable. So these are all things that you got to kind of keep in respect. Closing costs. A lot of times buyers will try to finance their closing costs into a loan. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. If a buyer's closing costs is, say, $6,000, and they don't have that money in the bank, they have a down payment, but they don't have their closing costs, they need to put that into the transaction. So what a lot of people will do is they'll negotiate a deal, and then they will add the $6,000 to the price, and then the seller gives a credit back of $6,000. Let me explain that a little bit deeper. If Patricia, if you were making an offer of $400,000 and you needed closing costs for $6,000, and if the seller was okay with the $400,000, if that's what we negotiated as a net sale price, we would say to the seller's agent, look, we're going to want to finance our closing costs into the transaction or into the deal. So whatever we land on for a final price, we're going to bump that up by $6,000. And then I'm going to put in a seller credit of $6,000. So in my example, if you and the seller agreed to a $400,000 sale price, we're actually going to write 406 on the contract. And then we're going to write seller to give buyer a $6,000 closing cost credit. So this shows the seller doesn't make any less money. All right. Their net is still the 400, which is what they agreed on. But the only way for me to finance my closing costs into the price is to write it into the transaction. Does that make sense to everybody? It's very common to see that, especially with the first-time home buyer market. Now, if you're on the seller side of the transaction, you might feel that that's really not a great thing for your client. All right. Educate your client. Call the buyer agent. Do they need those closing costs in order to do the deal, or are they simply just asking for the seller to pay? What I traditionally like to do is to mention if it's required, if the buyer needs that to be part of the transaction, then you need to write it in the contract right away. You don't wait until you've negotiated a price. It needs to be part of the original offer. All right. But if it doesn't, if it's something that you have a little bit more time to negotiate on, or you feel that you can discuss this with the listing agent, you might say to the listing agent, look, my buyer needs to finance their closing costs into the transaction. Would you recommend that we negotiate the deal first and then we'll bump up the price by that and do a closing cost concession? Or do you think I should just put it in the contract right away? So you want to kind of get their feeling on it too. You know, you don't want the seller to think you're changing the deal at the last minute, you know, but you want to have some counsel with the listing agent to figure out which way would they recommend. You know, what do they think is going to be best for them presenting the offer to their client? Contingencies. Is there home sale contingency that might be negotiated out? Is there contingency of a home? I'm trying to think of the 48-hour first right of refusal contingency. That gets a little bit more complex, but you know, are there specific contingencies that the seller isn't okay with, or are there specific contingencies that the buyer needs to put in there? Sometimes the buyer's getting their down payment from a retirement plan. They might be borrowing against a retirement plan. So that down payment receipt might take a little longer than the 10-day time frame. So you may have to make that second deposit not at the time of the purchase and sale, but at a later date. Okay, maybe it's going to take, you know, the bank wants, or the retirement company wants to see a signed purchase and sale, and once they see that, then they'll send the funds out within 14 days. Okay, well, when we sign the purchase and sale, we're supposed to give a second deposit. So maybe you make a smaller second deposit, and then you add a contingency that allows you to make a third deposit, which really adds up to what the normal deposit would have been had the money already been in their possession. So there's a lot of little, you know, quirks that could enter the equation. Subject to the property appraising. Some people are still putting that in their offers, if that's a contingency, or maybe the listing agent wants you to have the buyer waive their home inspection. You know, so those things all are negotiable. Once the buyer has their home inspection, they might not be okay with the overall condition. They might say, you know what, we want to negotiate some items here. The mold, if you have a property that has mold in it, that's something that buyers would traditionally want to have fixed. You know, the lead paint, if you find out the property has lead paint, you're going to probably want it to be remediated, or radon levels might be high, or maybe the well water analysis report came back and indicated that it needs to be treated. Or maybe there's some wood rot or termite damage, or something's broken. The buyer has the right through the contract, to either terminate the deal and get out altogether, or they can go back and they can try to negotiate some sort of repair or some sort of concession. Maybe the seller at that point says, I don't want to fix anything. I'll just give you $5,000, go away after that. And the buyer might be okay with that. All right. One thing I didn't put in here that I just thinking about now is the as-is clause. Have you ever heard of an as-is clause? As-is does not relieve the seller from disclosing what they know is wrong with the property. All right, so keep that in mind. If you tell the seller, hey, there's mold, they can't hide behind the as is clause and say, hey, you're buying it as is. Okay, but if we don't buy it, if we choose not to go forward, that now becomes a disclosure issue for you moving forward with another buyer. You've now got to disclose that prior to their writing a contract. Same thing with like lead paint. Any material fact or defect would have to be disclosed to any prospective buyer should your deal fall apart. So that's part of your negotiation too, is reminding the listing agent that, hey, if you don't take us seriously or you don't address our concerns, yeah, the deal falls apart, but now you're saddled with all this stuff. You now have all these things you've got to negotiate or you've got to disclose in advance. So that could potentially make you less money. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you might want to work out some sort of deal with us instead of trying to hide behind the as is clause. Okay. Appliances or other household goods or items that might be included or excluded from the sale. Those are also things that you're going to have to negotiate with the other side. Okay. Anyone think of anything else that might be a common negotiation? Anything that maybe you've encountered yourself that you didn't think of? No? Crickets? All right. So negotiation is indeed a skill that does need to be perfected or, becomes a skill that you work on a regular basis. Even though I've been doing it for 27 years, sometimes I hang up the phone and I think, geez, I probably should have handled that a little different. It didn't go the way I expected it to go. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing real estate for. You can always learn from other people, but in general, there are the 3 Ps approach, and these are typically what your best practices are. So you want to prepare, you want to present, and then you want to position your offer. So by preparing, we're referring to knowing what your ultimate goal is when you're negotiating a transaction. All right. You may start and finish in 2 different directions. So know where your goal is and always try to stay focused. Know your client. Is that something they're going to be willing to agree to or accept, or are they not? Are they so hell-bent about a particular item? Are they flexible? Do they have flexibility? If they're renting, they might have flexibility. If they're being kicked out of their apartment, they don't have flexibility. So you have to kind of understand, your client's needs. It says think ahead. I like to say anticipate what might happen if an event occurs. Try to set clear expectations with your clients. Let them know this is standard, this is not standard. I don't imagine this going over well with the other side. Always be informed. Make sure that you're in good communication with your clients. You understand exactly how they feel and what their position is. Naturally, you have to obey all the laws that we're faced with. And you should know your contracts. You should know your documents inside and out. You don't want someone to question time frame or contingency and you not be aware of what their buyer's rights are. So make sure that you do indeed read all of the contracts and have a full understanding of what they mean. More on preparing, you need to learn about the other side. Ask open-ended and close-ended questions. Questions that they can't just say yes or no. What additional information should I know about this property? The seller wants the 30-day closing. Why is that important to them? Okay. Saying, how do you feel about that? Well, that's definitely an open-ended question. Everyone's going to have different feelings and different um, ways of communicating those feelings. In your closed-end questions, are you looking for a specific answer? Yes, no, specific date. Do you have any other offers? Yes or no? What's the bottom line that your client would consider? Um, those are all just ways to prepare for your transaction. Ask what would happen if, or why is this important to you? Those are two good open-ended questions that do often assist you with the negotiation. When you present your offer, a lot of this we've already talked about. Pay attention to the verbal, nonverbal cues. Be quiet. Once you submit your offer and they have the information, put a button through the mouth. Don't say a word. The first person who speaks after an offer is made usually loses. All right, so you want it to be them that speaks. Listen carefully to everything. Make sure you understand what's important. Stay calm. Focus on your customer's needs. If it's your buyer client, then they are your client's needs. All right. And then give your offer the best chance. Plan, what are you going to say to the other side? What points do you want to make? Why do you want to, what can you say that will position your offer the best? All right, my buyer's not just pre-approved, but they're putting 20% down. They live at home with their parents. They're itching to get out of there. They have no debt. Their credit is wonderful. You're positioning your client and your offer the best possible way. Okay. This is just, what if, how would this affect you? They're asking for a 30-day closing. Why is that important? You don't just want to say to the seller wants a 30-day closing. Well, why? Why can't we do a 60-day closing? You want to have those informations, so that you can pass it on to your client, and it gives them understanding of why that's important to the other side, so they can consider that when they're doing their negotiations. All right. All right, so just to go over some of the contact to close. Anybody have any questions on negotiation of the deal? No? You guys are all quiet this morning. Matt, did you have a question? You lit up for a second.
Oh, no. I was just saying, no, that was great. No questions.
Okay, perfect. All right, so when you look at the contract to close, what's the buyer's timeline? Once you get an accepted offer on the property, the first thing you're going to do is schedule the home inspection. All right, now you probably don't want to be the one who does it for the buyer. You want the buyer, make them aware of what your schedule is and your availability, but ultimately let the buyer schedule the inspection, because you want them to choose who the inspector is going to be. You want them to be aware of the price. Are there additional inspections such as radon, lead paint, water quality, air quality, mold inspect? Do they want those things? So make the recommendation if you're a buyer's agent to your client. This is who I would recommend calling. Obviously, you're free to call anybody you wish, but let them make the actual appointment. Let them decide what services they want and don't want. Assuming your home inspection goes well and the buyer's not looking to bail, then you would try to negotiate any repair issues that you think could be negotiable. Now, just remember that if they say the house is being sold as is, it doesn't mean you can't go back and ask for repairs. Their rebuttal might be, sorry, we told you it's sold as is. Okay, we understand that, but the buyer wants to address this concern. All right. And ultimately, if they don't get anywhere and there's no, there's no giving from the seller side, then the buyer's gonna have to decide, are they willing to take the property as is, or are they gonna bail? All right. Oftentimes it comes down to that. So let's assume you get all your issues resolved. Now you're gonna have the purchase and sale. drafted. You're going to try to get the buyer and the seller's attorney to review that purchase and sale. They make their changes to it. You know, they cross out different words, they add different clauses. Each probably adds a rider or an addendum to that agreement. And, you know, the purpose of that is for them to try to both protect their respective clients. So the attorneys will negotiate back and forth over the wording of that contract. But it's our job to make sure the attorneys know what's supposed to be in that agreement. All right. If we don't tell them that the seller is including the refrigerator, they have no idea. So it's our job to convey that information to the attorneys. Once that's agreements agreed upon between the attorneys, the P&S is signed. The buyer is now going to submit for a formal loan application. Again, that's typically within 2 to 3 days after the contract's been signed. The lender's then going to order the appraisal and the title to be done, because now they've got to do a title search, and now they're going to order the appraisal. We don't do that, but this is what happens on the lending side. The buyer is going to submit all of their updated pay stubs, bank statements. This is important for you to stay in touch with the buyer as well as the lender to make sure that the buyer is submitting all the documentation that they need to. If the buyer is fast and they're always quick to respond, then the lender is going to say to you, no, we're good. They're right on top of things. But then you get your lazy buyers, or, you know, they don't check their voicemail till 8 o'clock at night, and they're slow at getting those documents back. Well, if that happens, if they continue that behavior, you're going to miss your dates. Maybe the loan commitment won't be done in time. So then you're going to have to request an extension. And if the seller doesn't grant you an extension, then the buyer either has to, you know, take a leap of faith that they're going to get their commitment and be okay with not having an extension, or they're going to have to dip out of the transaction because they want to protect a deposit, which oftentimes does happen. So you want to prepare the buyer to know, hey, now that your loan process is underway, make sure that you're always getting your documents back to the lender as quickly as possible. Every week when you get a paycheck, send it to the lender. Every month when you get your bank statement, send it to the lender. Your retirement account, anytime you get a statement, send it to the lender. All right. I can't preface that enough. That's really important to stay on top of that. Assuming that all goes well, the buyer will get their loan commitment. Hopefully you will not need to get an extension on that. The loan commitment always comes with conditions. Every single loan commitment letter has conditions. They have pre-closing conditions, and then they have post-closing conditions. We don't care about the post. All we care about is the pre. The post-closing is what the attorney or the lender is going to have to do. The pre-closing conditions are, you know, maybe they sent their March bank statement, but page 3 was not there. They want to verify that the buyer didn't withhold the page 3 for some stupid reason. Oftentimes it ends up being an advertisement that was on page 3, and the buyer just didn't send that to the lender. The lender needs to see, if it's an 8-page statement, they need to see all 8 pages, even if they're blank or contain an advertisement. So just make sure the buyer's aware of that. Once those conditions, those pre-closing conditions are met, then the lender gives what they call a clear to close. This is when you can kind of get excited and start to do your happy dance, because once you get a clear to close, you're basically at the finish line. Your toes are right on that line. And all you've got to do now is schedule your final walkthrough and hope that they don't die the day before closing. Right? Get them to the closing table. And that's pretty easy. You know, the final walkthrough is sort of a last minute, okay, this is the last chance you're going to see the house before you buy it. And I remember a guy did a final walkthrough, quick story because we got a few minutes. Guy did a final walkthrough the night before closing because he could not do it in the morning. He had to be at a meeting in the morning. So the night before the closing, everything was fine, no problems, went off without a hitch. They go to the closing the next day and they sign everything, exchange the keys, the money. Buyer's the new owner. Buyer has their moving company show up at the house, finds out that there's a huge tree that was blown down the night before in a windstorm that they didn't even know existed because they were sleeping. Tree was on top of the roof. So the buyer just bought a house that he can't move into. He has to first get the tree removed from his roof, and then he has to file a claim with his new insurance company, literally on day one, saying we have a problem. You need to remove the tree, and we got to fix the damage. This particular buyer took a month before he could move in, and again, he had a claim literally on the first day of his ownership. So my advice to you is drive to the final walkthrough right before you're closing. If you're closing at 11, final walkthrough is at 9:30 or 9. All right. The likelihood of something happening within 2 hours is very slim. But overnight, when we're all sleeping, you just never know. So that's my recommendation. Do it on the fly when you go into the closing table. All right. And then if you're on the listing side of the transaction, all of these other things are still going to be the same process, but you're going to have additional duties. You're going to have to get a final fuel adjustment. Some of you probably remember this from real estate school. In Massachusetts, fuel is considered to be personal property. So if you have an oil tank that has a full tank of oil, the buyer is supposed to reimburse the seller for those costs. So you want to have an idea of how much fuel is in the tank and what is it worth. Final water sewer reading, the seller is going to have to get final readings. A lot of times the listing agent is the one who orders the final water sewer reading. Final utilities, they're going to have to call and switch over the utilities to the buyer's name. They also have to do a smoke certification, a smoke and carbon monoxide detector inspection by the fire department. Without a smoke certificate, you probably are not going to close. Most banks will not close on a property unless they know that your smoke certificate is in order. All right. A lot of agents do that themselves. They call the fire department, they schedule it, they show up, and sometimes the agent will put up smoke detectors or carbon monoxide detectors. I used to do this years ago. I stopped. It's the worst idea ever. It's not our responsibility. We don't own the house. Last thing you want to be doing is putting up a smoke detector or a carbon monoxide detector. What if you installed it wrong? Now they're going to play the pointing game, and they're going to say, well, that was Patricia's fault. She didn't secure it properly. Or what if it's a wired system? If we're not electricians, we don't know what the heck we're doing. And let me tell you this, it's not just a matter of matching up the color of wires. You can't match the red wire to the red wire. A lot of times the colors are different. All right. And the smoke detectors have to be, if you're going to do a combination smoke detector, it has to be a speaking one. So if it does both smoke and carbon, it has to be a speaking detector. It has to say fire, fire, or carbon, it has to say something out loud. There's a lot of little things that, come up on that. You also have issues with the fire department. They could look at the fuel line to an oil tank. There needs to be a protective sleeve over the fuel line, or it needs to be a gravity fed fuel line so that you can't step on it and break it and have this huge oil spill in your house. House numbers, they can't be on the door. The fire department knows that if you have an emergency, you're going to open the door. and they're not going to be able to see the house number. So they want it to be on the side of the house in contrast with the color of the house so that they can easily see it. Trying to think of what else you might want to know. If you have a condo, you need to get a 6D certificate. That's a certificate from the association that says that all the condo fees have been paid in full and that there's no more money owed on those condos, on the condo fee. That document's required for closing. It has to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. All right, so these are all sort of things you need to know about the process. All right. Why is your relationship with your co-broke important? Couple reasons. One, you want to have a good reputation. You don't want people to think, that you don't want them to make a face when they hear your name. You want a smile on their face. You know, I'm so happy to be doing a deal with Patricia or Stacia. You know, that's the impression you want to leave. Another reason is because if they're good, if they're a great agent, you want to potentially recruit them over to Keller Williams. You know, add them to your downline, and then you're going to have potential, you know, revenue stream based on your recruitment. All right. You know, where could your deal be at risk with your co-broke? If you don't have a good working relationship with your co-broke, they might tank the deal for you. You know, Patricia's horrible. She never calls me back. She's unresponsive. I feel like she's, you know, the buyer's not even interested. You know, we have no control of what conversations the listing agent has with their seller, right? We're not there. We're not sitting at the table with them. We're not on the phone. We're not, you know, seeing or hearing their text messages. So you've really got to take care of your co-broke relationships. Okay. And finally, wow your clients. You want repeat business. You know, this is always something that has to be top of mind. If you can wow them with Keller Williams technology, you know, give them your KW app so that you can show them how advanced or technologically savvy you are. Create a vendor utility list. People oftentimes are looking for, you know, I need a new heating specialist. I need someone to mow the lawn. Who's going to be my pool boy? You know, we need a sprinkler servicing company. We need a painter. You know, so create a vendor or utility type list and give that to your clients, you know, so that they don't have to look, you know, people oftentimes they'll buy a house and they go on Facebook. Oh, we just bought a house and the pipe burst. Anybody know a plumber? You know, give them that information in advance because now they don't need to go to Facebook. They can just go right to your references. And last but not least is you need to plan some sort of closing gift. Believe it or not, there was a time when we got the gift. Real estate agents were given gifts. Now we have to give the gift. I don't know how the heck that switched, you know, but dang, that was fun when we got gifts. So what's your gift going to be? My recommendation to you would be give a gift with life. Give a gift with shelf life. What do I mean by that? Don't give them a bouquet of flowers that are going to die 2 weeks later and out of sight, out of mind. You know, don't give them a stupid door knocker because no one likes a door knocker. Give them give them something that's going to remind you or remind them of you, and it has shelf life.
I can give you an example.
Please.
I teach customer service at my full-time job, and I didn't want to bring up real estate because I didn't want to be conflicting, but somebody brought up real estate and they said, yeah, we bought this house. We showed up with our baby during the closing. Our real estate agent gave us a teddy bear for the baby. The baby's 3 years old and still has that teddy bear as the favorite teddy bear.
I mean, come on, right?
She said, I loved my agent.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great idea. The only downside, but clearly it's not because the kid still uses the teddy bear, is there's no logo or her name's probably not on the teddy bear, right?
I don't know. But
yeah.
the fact that she said she would use her again. And I said, that's a great story.
That's
Also,
awesome.
we have a globe that the person who sold us our house 14 years ago gave us. It's a glass globe still
Oh,
sitting on
really?
our shelf. And it does
Wow.
have her name at the front of it.
Yeah. If you give somebody a gift and it has your name and company on there, it actually, you can write it off. You can write off the full cost because it's considered marketing. If
Mhm.
you just give somebody a gift and it doesn't have that, then you can only write off, I think, $50 or it might even be less now. But yeah, you got to definitely think of that. What I used to do years ago was I used to have a picture of their house and I'd have a painting, a watercolor painting of their home made. And on the bottom corner of the painting, it would say, "Best wishes, Scott Gordon," and then the name of the company. And then what do? They hang that painting up on the wall, right? And anytime anybody comes over, "Oh, this is beautiful. Where'd you get that?" It says right at the bottom. But you don't want to give something that, chocolates that are going to melt, or a gift certificate, because those things expire, out of sight, out of mind. Patricia's got this beautiful glass globe. I'd love to see a picture of it. um, you know be unique, spend some money. Remember, these are clients that you want to have now and forever, and you want other people to be talking about you, about your gift, right? Like Patricia, you learned about this teddy bear. That's a pretty cool gift. That's Give some thought to your clients. I like it when I hear agents say, "I don't have a specific gift I always give. I try to get to know my clients and give them something unique to them." I think there's a lot more power behind that type of gift. So, all right, I'm done talking. Anybody got any questions, thoughts, concerns? Anybody have any cool gift ideas that they're thinking about? So far, we got a glass globe. I love that idea. Anybody?
I have a question, actually.
Yeah. Oh, question. Love questions.
Yes. As far as the gift, is there a dollar amount maximum allowed in Massachusetts that you can?
I would chat with your CPA, whoever does your taxes, and I'd ask them if there's a max gift amount. I mean, you don't want to get crazy. You don't want to give away your commission check either, but I think you spend at least $100. That's
Okay, yes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar property and you're making a ton of money, you got to up your game. But I would say at the very least I'd spend $100. You want it to be a nice, memorable gift. You don't want it to be something that they say, "Oh, thanks," and then they put it in a cabinet or on a shelf. Actually, on a shelf's okay as long as it's a shelf everybody can see. All right, so that's a tough thing. You all got to do something different. We had a guy on that did cutlery, so you could put your name and logo on the cutting board, and that was the marketing piece. And then they had these beautiful knives that you could buy, that could cut through anything type thing. That's a great example of something they're going to use all the time. You want them to see, oh, they're going to use that cutting board because it's beautiful. You want them to see your name or your logo or combination. And you don't want it to be huge. You want it to be subtle and professional. Do a little bit of research, figure out what other things you could do, but think of shelf life. We want my product to be used, and we want it to be used for a while. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts, questions? No? I feel like I'm talking to the abyss. I've got to.
I'm
Well,
pretty sure that in New Hampshire, you cannot go over $100. I think it's the law.
so talk to your CPA that, because they can give you the advice on that. I've never had my CPA say to me that you spent too much on that gift. But I don't go crazy either. I give them a nice, and again, I like to do something that's personal to the individuals. One of my clients has just got married and they're having a child. So I'm going to try to do something that ties their marriage and the birth of their child together into the gift. So I haven't figured out what I'm going to do yet, but I want to do something unique to them and not, just some, I got 50 of these in my basement. I get one every time I have a closing. So, all right, guys. Well, if you don't have any questions, thoughts, or concerns, I'm going to let you go free. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take advantage of the sun and go make some money. Take care,
Thank you,
guys.
Scott.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you.